Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining me again. Today, I wanted to kind of dive into my background and my story. I think that it's important to kind of explain that just to illustrate why and how I am where I am now, why I'm doing this podcast, what's happened in my life to get me this far, and so let's just jump into it. So I grew up Catholic in a Catholic household, and I always, as a little girl, believed in Jesus. I was taught about Jesus. I went to church every Sunday with my family. I got my first communion, all that stuff. And so I always believed in Jesus. I don't think I ever truly understood that he is personal, that he does desire a personal relationship with us. Or maybe I knew he desired a personal relationship, but I don't think that I understood that he speaks back to us. I remember praying often and praying as a little girl and completely being on board with Jesus is our Lord and Savior. Jesus is God. I never doubted that, but as a kid, it seemed more of like routine. Every Sunday, let's go to church, let's sit down. And as a kid, I found it so hard to pay attention, to really hear and soak in what was being said every Sunday. To me, it was just something you did. Oh my gosh, this is so boring. I couldn't connect on a personal level in service, during Mass. And so it wasn't until I was about 15 years old when my grandpa died. And at that time, that was the first death that I had ever experienced. And my grandpa in my family was the rock of the family. He was the patriarch of the family. He was a very strong in faith man who often talked about Jesus and encouraged us to go to church and encouraged us in him. And when he died, that really hit all of us very, very hard. I was 15 at that time, and we were all around him. My aunts, my uncles, all of my cousins. We have a very large family. My mom has 9 siblings. It's 10 with her, and they all have kids. And so we were every summer together. We were a very close-knit family growing up. And so when my grandpa died, he passed of cancer. We were all there at his house. He was on hospice, and as he took his last breath, we were there with him. Right next to him, he was in his bed, and all the little kids were surrounding him. And at that time, I was 15, but I don't remember thinking, oh, we shouldn't be doing this, or this probably isn't the best idea. Should the little kids be around? I was just kind of there in the moment. And so Grandpa passed, and we all got to be right there with him as he took his last breath. And now as an adult, I look back and I think, wow, what an honor to be able to be with him as he took his last breath and met Jesus, who he talked to us so much about. And when that happened, we were going through the phases of the funeral and the funeral services and all the things you do when your loved one passes. And at that time, it was the evening. I'm not sure if it was the evening of his funeral, but it was one of those days. And I was sitting outside in the evening with an older cousin of mine. He's a year older than me. And he was a party guy, and he was doing all the things that a lot of like wayward teenagers like to do. And he had turned his life around. He had met Jesus, and he was going to different countries of the world evangelizing and going on these missions. And so he was truly on fire at that time. And I found myself outside on my aunt's stoop in the evening, and he began to talk to me about Jesus and how personal he is. And that night, marked me. That night, something changed in me where I finally understood. I feel like my spiritual eyes were open and my heart was open to the fact that Jesus actually is very personal. Something changed in my spirit. And after that, I could not stop talking about Jesus. I was on fire for Jesus. And so I remember going back to high school after all that had finished. I went back to school and I remember talking to people one-on-one about Jesus, evangelizing and talking to them about how Jesus cares and how he knows all about you and how he loves you. And I was just pumped because I had met and understood Jesus in that way, or come to know him in that way, that I wanted to tell everybody about him. And after that, I would still, I still sinned. I still kind of, well, not kind of, I still strayed. I did things that I shouldn't have been doing, and that happened for years. And then I would go back, and then I'd have these moments of clarity where I'd be like, no, like, but Jesus loves me. And I'd have this kind of like back and forth for many years of understanding and realizing that Jesus is real, that I believed in him and I loved him. But at the same time, there would be parts of my life where I chose to live my life apart and do sinful things that he probably, well, that he wouldn't approve of, he wouldn't want for me. Sin. And I met my husband. We've been married for it's going to be 15 years this year. We have 3 kids. I would still talk to him about Jesus. He's a Christian too, and he grew up understanding and knowing Jesus as well, and believing. And we both kind of lived in the world. Not kind of, we did. We both lived in the world for years, and we had our daughter before we got married. And we just went through our own things, relationship-wise. And so then I got pregnant with our son, who's the middle son, and we got married soon after I found out I was pregnant with him. After that, something, I can't tell you what exactly changed, but I just really wanted to get closer to Jesus again. I really wanted to seek him out, and I would talk to my husband about Jesus all the time, and I loved being able to talk to him about Jesus, and I've never been ashamed. I've never felt like I had to hide that part of myself. I've never felt like I had to hinder that part of myself for him, which is amazing. And really, he would just be there to listen and to be someone next to me and cheer me on. And so I remember wanting to fast, and I remember seeking Jesus out. And I, at that time, got so much spiritual pushback. Mind you, I wasn't taught about all the things that come with a Christian life. I just knew I loved Jesus. I knew Jesus loved me. I felt a fire in my spirit for him. I felt a pull towards him. But I had no background knowledge of any spiritual gifts. I had no background knowledge of spiritual warfare, nothing at all. And so I knew about fasting. I knew people fasted, but I didn't know how you fast, why you fast, how long do you fast, nothing. I just had the idea in my mind one day, and I thought to myself, I was really being pulled to do that and to seek him. I really had this desire to seek him and to know him deeper. And so I told my husband, I'm going to start this fast. And so I did. I started a fast, and I began to journal. I'm a big journal person anyway. But I began to document and journal every single day what was going on. And I began to get a lot of spiritual pushback, things that were happening. At that time, we were living with his parents, all in one room. It was me, my husband, and our 3 kids. So at that point, we had a 4, a 2, and a newborn. And we were all in one room. Small beginnings, humble beginnings, but we were happy. And I remember going to sleep at night and getting spiritually attacked. And I didn't even know that language. I didn't even know what that meant. I just knew something was happening. There was an unsettled feeling in my spirit. And nightly, I would feel what I describe as terror. If you've ever watched a scary movie and you know a part is about to happen and you have that internal buildup of fear and it's going to happen any second, you're expecting it, that's what I kept feeling. I was terrified all the time. And as I went to sleep, I remember one night I felt something I can't really describe, but it felt like almost like a wave coming, leaving, coming, leaving, coming, leaving. And it felt like, or I sensed like it wanted to enter inside my body. And so the whole night I was just terrified. Now, I didn't really know what was going on. I just knew I was terrified and I could sense this coming and going and this idea that it wanted to enter into my body. And so the whole night I was just terrified. I couldn't sleep. And so I woke up the next day and my daughter was in kindergarten. So my husband was at work at that point. Here I go in mom mode. And so I'm getting the kids in the car and I get my daughter to kindergarten. I had forgotten all about it because once you're a mom, you're just in go mode. You don't think about anything until like you get all the kids to school or you get everyone situated and then you can kind of take a break. And so that's what was happening. I remember we were driving back and as soon as we pulled up to the driveway, my middle son, which was 2 at the time, asked me, Mom, where's the man? And I had no idea what he was talking about. So I said, which man? What are you talking about? And he said, the man with the eyes. And I was thinking, I sensed in my spirit something's wrong here. And I said, which man? And I still didn't remember what was going on the night before. And he said, the man with the angry eyes next to what he would call his little brother's crib. The man with the angry eyes next to his crib last night. And that's when I realized, oh my gosh, he sensed or saw what I was sensing all night long. And my middle son has had multiple encounters where he's actually seen things. And he's such a stoic little boy. He's very matter of fact. He's not easily swayed either way. It's hard to get a smile out of him, not to say that he's not happy, but he's just very stoic. And so ever since that son was little, his name is Aiden, ever since Aiden was little, he's always been just very matter of fact. You know where he stands. Whichever way it is, you know. And so he has had these experiences and he's just very matter of fact about what he sees, and he just explains to us, this is what I saw, and goes about his day. And that was the first time that I realized, wow, okay, he validated what I had been feeling all night and sensing he actually saw. So in that moment I realized, okay, that wasn't just me, that was really going on. I'm not crazy. And so things like that would happen. And so a few times, like he has some stories that he could share of things that he's seen, and I've helped him with like understanding and walking through these experiences that he's had for him to understand. And he's never been afraid of what's going on, and I'm thankful for that. I've been able to really explain to him and sit with him and talk about it. And so that's kind of where I was. And so I was fasting, that was going on, and I had a lot of crazy experiences that I had no context for. I had no language for. I didn't know these kinds of things even existed, but I was definitely experiencing them. And so at that time, I didn't have a spiritual leader. I didn't have someone that I can go and ask these questions to besides Christian's older brother who was a Christian. And I would ask him sometimes like, hey, this is kind of going on. And I'd seek him out sometimes. But for the most part, it wasn't really like something that I felt completely comfortable with, like just going and asking and picking his brain about. And so I kind of felt alone and isolated in these experiences. And I just dealt with them as best as I could and tried to understand. And I sought God through all of it. And so soon after that, after a lot of spiritual, what felt like walls and blocks, I kept pushing through. I kept pursuing. I kept pressing in because I still had this deep desire to meet Jesus, to encounter Jesus more and more and more and more. And there's so many things that happened in that season of seeking him out. And I remember one day I was taking a nap. No, I wasn't taking a nap. I remember one day I was soaking, what you call soaking in the Spirit, just spending time meditating with Jesus, just putting some worship music on, instrumental music, and just really spending time with him, and kind of learning to just be with him and still your mind and just allow yourself to be quiet with Jesus. I was doing that every day, and I remember I could not wait to put my babies to sleep for their nap so that I can run and go spend that time with Jesus. And that was that season of my life. And I remember one day I got the babies to take their nap, and I ran over to have my quiet time, and I would get in the bed and I would put my instrumental music on, and I would just spend this beautiful quiet time with Jesus. And I had this experience that, again, I had no context for. I had never experienced it before. No one had ever talked to me about the possibility of this even happening. I had no idea about the realm of this happening, but I remember it was as if I was watching a movie. I had my eyes closed. I was laying on the bed, and I saw, it was dark. I saw someone enter into the view of what I was seeing in my mind's eye, and it was my cousin's wife. And she was crying. She was sobbing. And in front of her, she was not pushing, but, like leading her son who is autistic. And she was crying and crying. And she walked him over to Jesus. All of a sudden, Jesus was there in that vision. And I don't remember like seeing his exact face, and I just knew it was Jesus, and I knew it was her crying and bringing her son to him. And I remember Jesus blowing on his forehead. I remember Jesus was standing, there was a doorway between them, and Jesus kissing him or blowing on his forehead, on my cousin's son's forehead. And I remember I'm watching this as if I'm watching a movie. And I remember within my spirit asking Jesus, which surprises me because I don't know that I wouldn't be aware that I would be that brave to ask him a question, but I did. And I said, Jesus, is this a healing? And Jesus said something along the lines of, I wrote this down in my journal, but it's been so many years, but along the lines of, if you have faith, anything can happen. And I thought, oh my gosh. And I woke up out of that, or I came out of that, because it was like this movie was just presented to me. And I remember, what the heck was that? And I felt this feeling I had never felt. I felt like there was this weightiness to what I had just witnessed, that wasn't just something to dismiss. I couldn't explain why. That had never happened to me before. But I felt like I needed to reach out to her. And so I texted her. And I didn't even really talk to her through text at that point. We were on good terms, but we just weren't that close for me to reach out to her via text and say, hey, even be so open and vulnerable with her. But I felt this pull to tell her, oh my gosh, my hands were shaking. I was terrified. But I sent her a text and I told her exactly what happened. I said, I don't know what this means, but this is what I just experienced. And I was terrified, but I did it anyway because it felt, like I said, so weighty. And I was like looking at my phone. What is she going to respond? I had no idea what she would respond. I didn't know if she was going to rebuke me. I didn't know if she was going to be upset with me. I had no clue. And so I was dying to see what she would reply. And I can't tell you how long it took, but it felt like an eternity for her to respond back. And she responded, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. She said, this morning as I was driving into work, I was crying. and talking to Jesus and asking him. She was worried about her son who's autistic, and she was telling Jesus about what would happen if the day she's no longer here to care for her son, or her husband is no longer here to care for her son. And I was shocked, to say the least, because what I had witnessed was her in that vision bringing her son to Jesus and crying. And now she's telling me just that morning she was crying in her car on her way to work and telling Jesus about her fears of not being there one day for her son and what was going to happen to him. And those things started happening to me, and I didn't know what to do with them. I knew that I was having these experiences. I didn't know what to call them. I didn't know what category to put them in. I just knew this kind of thing kept happening to me, and over and over and over and over, these things kept happening to me. These type of spiritual experiences would happen where I was given a glimpse into what was going on with someone personally, and then it would be validated when I would tell them. They would confirm, yeah, that is what's going on. And that would get me so excited, because I thought, wow, Jesus, you are so personal. You really are hearing us. You're with us every moment, and nothing is hidden. And so I was growing in my excitement and my love for Jesus and my knowledge for how personal he is and how much he cares, enough to use a complete stranger to see and to encourage them in the fact that he's with you. And in that moment, as you were driving and you were speaking to him, he heard you. That would happen over and over and over again. And it was such a beautiful season. And at that time, I didn't have a community. I didn't have a church community. It was just me learning, like a honeymoon phase with Jesus, how beautiful his heart is and how personal he is, and in the everyday. And so that really grew me in that area of love for him and desire and drive and passion for him, even more so. And I remember asking Jesus for months and months and months. I felt isolated. I felt like I needed and wanted so badly to be around people who were just as much in love with Jesus, who couldn't get enough of Jesus as well. And so I was asking him for months, Jesus, where's my community? Would you please send me some people that I can spend my life with, that I can live life with and be in community with, like-minded people who are in love with you just as much as I am. And that took months of me pressing in and asking for community. And he finally told me about this church. My best friend's brother was starting a new church, and she invited me over. And I remember asking Jesus, is this it? And he did tell me that was the church. And I wasn't sure it was, so I had to ask him again, Jesus, are you sure? Is this the church that I've been asking you for? Is this the community that you've sent for me, that I've been seeking? And you know that I've desired this. Is this them? And again, he confirmed. He spoke to my spirit and said, yep, this is it. This is what you've been asking for. And so I was so grateful. And through that, he grew me even more. Through that, I have learned to understand through the different seasons I've been with this church for. They just celebrated 10 years now. I've understood through the many seasons that how crucial a part community plays. And yes, there's a time where Jesus has us to himself, and he had to teach me. He had to pull me away from, I guess, the reliance on people, because there was this part of my story, there was this part of my life, this season of my life where I wanted the answer now. Anything that I wanted to really press into and find out about, gain wisdom, I would go to people right then and there, because I wanted the instant answer. I wanted the instant gratification. I wanted someone to be able to, like a soundboard, like, what do you think about this? And he had to kind of strip me of that. And the way he did that was showing me, I wouldn't say he isolated me, because that, like, Jesus wants us to be in community, but he had to teach me the hard way for me to listen. He had to show me what his voice sounded like, and how his voice is higher than the other voices. And there's this part of my journey with him where he had to teach me to come to him for those things first. And then you go to your community, but it's supposed to be relationally first. It's supposed to be vertical, and then it goes horizontal. But I was doing it the other way around. I was bypassing him and going to the, what do you think? And he was just kind of an afterthought. And so he had to teach me. And so through my years of being in community and through my years of being with this church, I've learned that our gifts, the things that he places in our lives, yes, they're for us to understand him and to have relationship with him, because that's why we were created. He desires that. But the huge component of that also is community, how important community is. Isolation, there's a season for everything, but living a life as a Christian in isolation is very dangerous, because if you are only listening to your point of view, there's a lot that you're missing out on. There's beauty in all of these people that Jesus gifts us with. There's so many, it's the hands and feet of Jesus expressed through so many different personalities and life experiences and wisdom, and of all ages. And when you live life isolated from that, you are missing out on so much. When you find a community that Jesus gifts you with, when Jesus gives you these people, don't take them for granted, because iron sharpens iron. We know that Jesus uses his people, his children, to preach the gospel and to live in accordance with his word, and how that is expressed is very unique. And if we're living a life of isolation, who's speaking wisdom to you, to us? Who's allowed to tell us, hey, you know what, like, I think that maybe we should sit down and talk about this? There's so much wisdom, and there's a time and place, but humility plays a huge role in that. And us as believers, we're not supposed to live a life of isolation. The church is his bride, and his intention is for us to live in community with one another, encouraging one another. Look in his word, it says that. And you'll find that he created us to be in community. And I know that sometimes we want to rebel and make excuses as to why we don't need to be in church, and I'm guilty of this too. But I've said this in my journey, and I know people who are here, and there's grace for this. But to say, well, church is a people of believers, and yes, while that is true, the local church plays a huge role, and I believe that is pride. And the opposite of humility, to believe that you're better off by yourself in isolation, and you're better off, and you know best in all situations. And if no one is able to help you grow in love, if no one is able to know what's really going on in your life and build you up in Jesus, you're missing out on so much. We miss out on so much. And so I've learned through my journey how important I've thirsted for community. I've seen what life looks like without it, and it is a life stripped of so much that Jesus intends for us. Just the power and beauty that comes with the community that Jesus provides us with is immeasurable, and it's crucial. It's detrimental if you are in isolation. And I would say that there's a season, just like I had that season with Jesus, where he had to teach me, look, I'm first, and then everybody else is a complement to that. They are my gift to you, but come to me first. I want you to understand my voice so that when I'm leading you, you understand. His word says, my sheep hear my voice and they listen to me. We have to understand his voice, yes, but community plays a huge role in that. And so that's kind of my background, where I had no language for years as to what was going on, what I was experiencing. I then learned the word, the prophetic, or you have a prophetic gift. And now, out of all of these years, I now understand that Jesus desires that for all of us. And I remember desiring that. As those things were happening, it grew my desire more and more and more. And I would begin to hear, this is something that you can ask for. It's biblical. You can ask Jesus for the prophetic, for the gift of prophecy, and not prophecy as in like foretelling, but it's, for me, what I've come to understand is that is a connection to his heart. That's a glimpse through all the experiences of where he has shown me about what's going on in someone's life. The heart of compassion and love is the main thing. Every time Jesus has given me something, kind of like an inside information about what's going on with someone, it's because he's shown me how much he loves his children and how much he desires for them to know that he is very present in their life and that he understands, he loves them, he sees them. That is just the connection that I've learned through the prophetic, through what he has taught me. What the point of that is, it glorifies him in their heart. They get to see, wow, Jesus is Lord, but he also is loving, and he cares about me. It takes it a little bit further. It helps the believer to have personal faith. It grows your personal faith in the person of Jesus. And so, as I said, I went through all of that without having knowledge of what really was happening to me. I just knew what I was experiencing, and I had so many different things going on at that time. And so I look back at that time of him growing and teaching me with so much gratitude. And I love that he took me on that journey with him, and I love the way he introduced himself to me, because his desire is for us to know him. And once we've experienced him in such personal ways, there is nobody that can tell you any different about your personal experiences with him. No one can say that didn't happen. And so many people have different opinions, and there's like I believe, in my opinion, we can have differences of opinions on small things, but when it comes to the meat and bones of theology, of the gospel, that cannot be misinterpreted. But when it comes to small things, I feel like it's kind of personal preference. Like, what do you believe in? What do you believe in? There's a lot of opinions about the talk of the prophetic and the talk of the Spirit, and for a bit that hindered me. And I believe that's why Jesus had to take me on that journey, because I had to come to understand and know him personally. Like he told me several times, I want you to know my voice, so that when all the other voices are competing or trying to compete, the doubts and the way the enemy wants to come in and twist things, I've gone through that walk with him. He's sifted me through all of that, and I've come out to understand his voice that much stronger. I've come to understand his character that much more, so that I can weigh it against, I can put it against his word. And I would know, this aligns with your word, Jesus. This aligns with the character that I've experienced, and it makes it all the more real. It becomes more personal, and it's no longer just head knowledge. It's now a part of you. And so that's my story. That's where I'm at. I am a work in progress, just like all of us are. God is faithful to work in us until the last day of our life here on this earth, and he is constantly transforming us into his image. He's constantly pruning us He's constantly teaching us something new. And I just want to encourage you in that there's a season for everything, and Jesus takes his time with us because it's not a race for him. He's very intentional about his walk with us, and he's very intentional about revealing himself to us. And if you desire to have that relationship with him, if you desire to know him more in those ways, I encourage you to ask him. It's okay to ask him. I asked him. And the person that I know Jesus to be would delight in the fact that you want to know him more. He loves spending time with his children, and he loves that we are seeking him out. And I just want to finish off there. I'm sure I'll share more at another date, but that's kind of my background and what's kind of gotten me to today. And so thank you for joining, and I'll see you again next time. Bye. how important community is to us as believers, and what kind of role it really plays in our walk and the way God would have us live our life here on this earth. He gives us different gifts, and all those gifts are supposed to be for his bride. It's not just for us. And how would we be properly utilizing those gifts and living out the way he intended if we're isolated? So the role of community is just so community is so important. And the reason he gives us the gifts that he gives us is for us to use them with one another. Each of us has a different gift, and so that's supposed to play in with community. If we're isolated, who are we going to use those gifts with? Not only that, but being in community really does help us grow. He uses community to shape us, to teach us. It teaches us also humility, because living a life alone really is kind of prideful, because what that says is, at the root of that is, I know best and I do better by myself. And that's not how Jesus would have us live life. He had disciples. He was teaching. What did he do in the years that he was here on this earth? Yes, he took time away, but that wasn't living life in isolation. And so I've understood what community means, and the role that it plays with the believer. And as a Christian, how crucial it is to be in community, because we can help each other, we can guide each other, we can kind of gauge and see things, because we all have blind spots, and so we can help each other. And it's such a sweet experience to live life with people who love Jesus as much as we do. Because our heart is to love one another. If you truly are in community, if you truly are in relationship with Jesus, over time, the way you see things, the lens with which you look at the world, begins to reflect your relationship with him. It begins to reflect who you spend time with. It your mind is renewed, your thought patterns are renewed, and so the more and more time you spend with Jesus and submit yourself to him, the more and more you begin to reflect him. And we'll never be perfect, because we're human and we're in a fallen world. But the more you spend time with Jesus, you're going to see you'll see the fruit in people's lives, who truly is submitted, and who is not, and who lives life with Jesus and who is not. And not to say that no one will ever be perfect and no one's ever going to do it perfectly, but the role of community is crucial to the believer. There's just so many benefits, like I said, about like helping each other, supporting one another when we're going through hard times, having that community to lean on, to ask for prayer, to build each other up. And we know iron sharpens iron, and so Jesus really truly desires for us to live life with one another, uplifting one another, praying for each other, and sharing the word with the world around us. And so that can only happen in community and not in isolation. And so I'd like to stop there and just end there. And we'll pick up somewhere else, but I hope that kind of gives you a background as to who I am, a bit of my story and my background, and where I am now. So thank you so much for joining, and I'll see you next time. Bye.